Pies that please. Janet McIntyre is going to teach us how to bake a pie.
When you photograph it, why don't you start with the photograph out the window, because it's quite pretty. You go that way and you go through this window. Oh, and last time you'd taken a photograph of the yard. That's nice. See. Okay, Mary, here is the cookbook I've used. It's a 1963 Better Homes and Gardens cookbook. And on page 588, it has a fresh berry pie recipe. So thank you for bringing the blackberries, all 6 cups that we'll use to make the pie. The recipe calls for 2/3 to 3/4 cup granulated sugar. And because they're a little puckery, and I'm using 6 cups rather than 4, I'm going to use 3/4 cup of cane sugar. And to that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of flour, because the flour is the thickening. And I'm going to heap it up a bit because, again, we're using 6 cups of berries, not 4. And it adds next 4 1/2 teaspoon of grated lemon, but I'm going to use the whole lemon. And I'm going to use this really cool microplane grater, but you could use this if you didn't have it. Microplane grater is great. It does a great job of just getting the zest and not the white underneath. And your fingers are not in danger if you're careful. So you're going to zest the whole lemon like this. And it just calls for a little bit. I like the zest. And why waste it? And then we'll add the lemon juice to the berries themselves rather than to the sugar, because if you add the lemon juice to the sugar mixture, it clumps and doesn't distribute well through the berries. So see this cool thing? It's all contained there. You just do that, dump it out, and voila. Then we're going to, I need a knife. Use this one. Oops. Using a knife. Oh boy, this is a dull one. Take the seeds out because you don't want to have to fish them out. And you want 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, which I'm going to add directly to the berries. Now notice, I've got all the ingredients I need, well mostly, set out because it's so easy to forget something. Like if I didn't do the lemon juice now, I might just forget it. And it adds a nice baking factor. And just distribute it through the 6 cups of blackberries, which you brought. Okay, next it calls for a quarter teaspoon of nutmeg right here. And remember, I am using 6 cups, so I'm going to use a heaping quarter teaspoon. And it calls for half a teaspoon of cinnamon. So I'll just heap it up a bit. Spread it out. And then it calls for 1/8 teaspoon salt. Now, I'm just going to do this. 1, 2, 3. There's probably about 1/8 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to mix it together like this with sort of a flat spoon. And you want to thoroughly mix it because you want to get that salt and that cinnamon sugar, the lemon rind, the flour, all thoroughly mixed together. With that done, what I find is quite effective is to take the pre-measured berries and simply dump the sugar mixture right over them, and then sort of scoop it around so it drapes through, and then dump it back in. Oh boy, that's good. They're juicy too. Pick out some of the things that are in there and stir it. So here you have 6 beautiful cups of blackberries. You could use the same recipe for raspberries, blueberries, any kind of berry. And this is pretty juicy, so I may end up, I can add a little bit more flour because it's quite juicy. And this will be the pie mixture, which we will put into the bottom crust and then add about 5-6 dollops of butter before putting on the top crust. So we're going to set this aside and turn on the oven to 425 with the oven in the rack in the middle. The oven goes on to 425 on to bake. Notice that there is tin foil because you'll see previous pies have bubbled over. And I'm going to have ready a pie tin to go underneath it that I'm going to spread with Pam because it's really hard to get off the baked on juice. So that's just going to be ready. Okay, for the crust. Using the Better Homes and Garden Cookbook, Pies That Please, the all-important pastry flaky crust on page 584. Old recipe, but it works. Again, I've got the ingredients all out so that I don't forget anything. The recipe calls for 2 1/4 cups sifted all-purpose flour. No need to sift it. So it's, where's those knives? When measuring flour or any other dry ingredient, that's 1, 2 1/4 cups flour. This is an all-purpose, unbleached King Arthur flour, which I really like, but gold medal will work. It's just unbleached and it's good. Then it calls for 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm using Morton's iodized. It's always good to measure salt not over your mixing bowl, because you could end up getting 2 teaspoons instead of 1 very easily. Then it calls for 3/4 plus 2 tablespoons shortening. Crisco all vegetable. I've measured out a cup, and it calls for 1 cup minus 1 tablespoon. So just a shallow cup goes into this, but first of all, I'm going to take a fork and mix that salt in real well. If you were using the Cuisinart, you would add the flour and the salt and pump it to mix the flour and the salt, and then you'd put the shortening in and pump it again until it was about the consistency of cornmeal. We're going to add the shortening now, and we're not going to use a pastry blender because you don't have one. Instead, we'll just, as the recipe calls for, use two butter knives. Works just fine, takes a little longer, but a lot less space in your cupboard. So here I have, and you notice I'm using the cup to get the shortening so that you don't use the rim of the bowl and end up wearing the shortening. So you're just going to cut this in using a scissor-like motion. Takes a little while, but it's worth it. Okay, this is looking like cornmeal. It's been cut into. It took probably about 3 or 4 minutes. It takes a while. So you're going to set that aside. And this is what I do. If you had a pastry cloth, you could use it. But I find that saran wrap, this is stretch tight plastic wrap from Costco. Something like this works really well. It's fiddly, but the results are worth it. So because this is the household size, not the commercial, it takes 2 pieces, like about this, because you're going to want to make a square, and 1 piece is a rectangle. Then you're going to take the, take my rings off. You're going to take the, it calls for 1/3 cup iced water. And I put water in a cup with 2 ice cubes, chilled it. I'm going to remove the ice cube. I'm going to, it's exactly 1/3 cup, almost. I'm going to, now this is cold, I'm going to add this to the mixture a little at a time. Stir it with a fork. And depending on the humidity, it depends on how much you use. You do not want to dump it all at once, and you do not want your dough to be sticky. So I'm forking it in bit by bit. Notice I've got just 1/3 of it left. If you were in a Cuisinart, you would add it through the top and pulse the Cuisinart to mix it. You don't want it too dry because it won't hold up. You don't want it too wet because it loses its flakiness. It becomes sort of stodgy like a lot of commercial pie dough. That looks real good. It's sticking together. It's not too wet. And I still have that much water left. Okay, I'm going to put it in a plastic bag and let it sit for just a while so that the moisture permeates all of the flour. Using a grocery store bag or a newspaper bag, I'm just going to put it over the bowl like that, turn it upside down. Comes pretty clean. And form it into a ball. And let it sit briefly. Then I prematurely took out the saran wrap. You could do that now, doing 2 pieces of saran wrap, making a square on your cupboard. Again, if you have a pastry cloth, you could just spread it out. And the pastry cloth has a predetermined circle on it, which is really nice. Okay, I think I can do this. I'm going to divide the dough in half and leave half in the plastic bag. If I find that the dough, I didn't add enough flour, I can still go back and add a little bit more water from my ice water. So I've got half of the dough here. It's important to get half because you don't want too little on the bottom. Otherwise you're going to add some as you're rolling it out. Okay, I'm going to make a ball out of it, like this, and put it in the middle of my plastic wrap and seal this back up. You can continue to hydrate while I roll this out. Pressing that down as much a circle as you can. And then take 2 more pieces of plastic wrap, like this. Lots of fun with the thumb split. And the plastic wrap wants to cling to itself. That's why some brands are called cling wrap. But you want to get it as flat as you can. Okay, there you've got it covered, top and bottom. Smooth it out. And with your rolling pin, you're going to start at the middle and roll out in all directions. You're going to watch that the plastic wrap doesn't creep under the pastry dough, which it tends to do, because it's hard to get out if it does that. You want as much a circle as you can. And it's going to be just a little bit larger than your pan. I'm using glass pans, which means the temperature is probably going to be, well, I've got it set at 425. I may reduce it to 400, because usually they say with glass pans do 25% less, 25 degrees less. Okay, notice that I have 2 pie tins the same size. If you don't have 2, you might have a plate that's the same size. I measured, and you see it's got a ways to go. You want to keep the pastry the same thickness all the way through. Almost. It's a little thicker here, so I'm going to roll it this way. I'm going to take the inverted pie bowl, and press down to make an imprint. Then I can see where I need to do a little repair. For some places it's a little thin, and some places it goes a little beyond the border. Peeling off the plastic wrap. Carefully. Smoothing as I go. And if you get cracks or tears, you just smooth them out, no problem. And I don't reuse the saran wrap. It would be less wasteful, but it's hard with the wrinkles to smooth it out. Careful when you pull it out, because you can make quite big tears like that and that. Again, it's not hard to smooth it out. And then I'm just going to fold that over and press that in. It's just a little bit larger than the imprint. The nice thing about the plastic wrap is that you can pick it up and put it into the tin or the pie plate, and then make some more repairs. Okay, there we go. It's mostly round. Doesn't have to be exact. Then pull it to the counter edge, and put your hand right in the middle. Flip it over. it should be, if it's centered, even all the way around. You want to take your finger and press it in, get rid of any air bubbles that might be there. Press it in. There may be a few pleats. And you want to have it just go over to the edge of the pie plate so that it will join with the top crust. But because you've pre-measured, you really probably don't have to cut off anything. Again, when you lift the plastic wrap, do it carefully because you don't want to bring it up the pastry. Okay, I'm pleased with that. Now I'm going to add the berries, but I'm going to put another tablespoon of flour in that because they're awfully juicy. The previous pie we made, they weren't as ripe, and so we didn't need as much flour. But I don't like the restaurant pies where they put a lot of thickening in and they stand up nice and neat in the pie plate. Stir it in, then carefully spoon it into the pie crust. Oh, we may not add all the berries here. Let's see. If not, you've got an awfully nice ice cream topping. I think that's about as much as that pie can hold. Yep, maybe a little bit more here. Okay, we're just going to leave that there. Then we're going to add the butter so we don't forget. Notice corn has been rolled in that butter. That's why it's that way. Then we're going to take and put little slices of butter around like this, about 5 places. This adds to the richness of the pie. I perhaps added a little bit much there, but we'll let it go. Then we're going to repeat the whole process again. We're going to spread out the saran wrap, using 2 pieces to make a square. Here we put the butter on the top of the pie with the filling. Then we're going to take the second pie crust and putting a hand underneath it. I'm left-handed, so I'm going to put my left hand. Take it to the edge, and we're going to put it right over in the center on the pie. And if it's not quite centered, the beauty of the plastic wrap is that you can move it around a little. Okay, so you want to center it as much as you can. And then you want to smooth it down like this. Then carefully remove the plastic wrap. Not quickly, just a little patience, because the pastry could come up with the plastic wrap. Then, this is sort of, I may have you do this, Mary. You're going to curl this up and press down with your finger and your thumb. Notice my thumb is a little incapacitated, but we'll do this. And you're going to, again, the bottom part, which is a little larger than the pie plate, it's tucked under, and you're going to go around and crimp it all the way around. Crimped all the way around the edge, and now I'm just going to take gently pull it in like that, just so there's no thin edges. And then taking a fork, I'm going to divide it in half and make 5 pricks with the fork going just through the crust, and then 2 here and 2 here. And if you're dividing this pie into 8 generous slices, they become your cutting guide as well. Then, and that's for the steam to escape, then I'm going to put a little bit of sugar on the top. Grandma used to use a little condensed milk and sugar, but I just prefer straight sugar. And then I'm going to take 2 pieces of long tin foil and have about 3 inches and put them around the edge of the pie so that the crust doesn't get overdone. Stop. Okay, I'm using an 18-inch roll of tin foil. I'm going to, about 3 inches, I'm going to fold it in half like this loosely, and here. And then, using as little as I can, because this just barely goes around, I'm going to fold it together like that. And then take it and gently bring it around and crimp it and fold it in. And voila, the pie is oven ready. There you go. I'm going to put it in the oven, which, if you recall, was preheated at 425. But this is a glass dish, so I'm going to turn it down to about 410. And I'm going to slip in the oven. And it's going to take 40 to 50 minutes to bake. But in about 30 minutes, I'm going to slide this pan underneath because this pie is sure to run over. I think I'll set the timer for 30 minutes just to remind myself to put that. I'm going to set it for 25. Put a pie pin underneath the pie, remember sprayed with Pam. I'm going to undo this so that the crust can brown. And it will probably bake for about 10 more minutes. Be sure to center the pie plate over the cookie tin underneath. I've also put a cookie tin on top so that when I remove the pie, I can go from one surface to another because it will probably drip. A correction, it was not Better Homes and Garden. The cookbook I used, 1963 Good Housekeeping Cookbook. This pie freezes very well. You can simply keep the tin foil around the edges and take a big sheet of tin foil, put it on the top, crimp it and on all sides so it's very airtight, and carefully put it in the freezer when it's cool or cold on a flat shelf, and be sure not to put anything on top of it. And then when you go to reheat it, take it from the freezer and put it in the oven preheated to 400, and when it starts to bubble on top is when you want to know that it's thoroughly thawed and ready to present. You can just keep the foil on top because you've already browned the crust on top. It's nice served when you serve it. If it's not out of the oven or if it's been refrigerated, you might warm it up before serving because it tastes a lot better in the oven. It's been in about 45-50 minutes. The tin foil was removed about 10-12 minutes ago. It's not running over, but if it was, even if it's not, I would take both shelves out together, then go directly up to a waiting cookie sheet. Again, this is not leaking. We added, yes it is, but just a little bit. So that was good. It took it out just at the right time. And there you have it. One blackberry pie collected by Mary McIntyre, photoed by Mary McIntyre, and put together by her mom.
You.